Hey everyone, time for another active self-protection extra lesson. This one driven by current events. We are currently just outside of the 72-hour window with the horrific shootings that happened on Sunday morning at the church just outside of Nashville. And they're still gathering information, but we do know a few things about that. And out of that, I want to talk about thinking about security for those who go and worship on a weekly basis. You know that I pastor a church and here in the Phoenix area. And pastoring a church in a church setting in general has some unique considerations, and we must recognize that attacks on churches are not isolated incidents at this point. I mean, they happen not with the severity that we saw. This particular week we had one person murdered and six others shot, and the gunman actually was hit as well. But I want to talk about some of the things that you might consider in your church security plan. Now, what I really want to say about this is that we are actually doing on Friday in Jackson, Nebraska, we are doing a seminar for church workers and for pastors and for church leaders on church security. And that's the first one of its kind that we're doing. So, in addition to the Survive the Fight tour, we're in Sioux City, Iowa, Jackson, Nebraska. There's kind of a bunch around there. We're doing a class for everybody on personal protection on Friday night, and then a handgun skills class based on what we learned on Friday night on Saturday. But in addition to that, on Friday during the day, we are doing a seminar very particularly for those who work in a church environment, for those who lead their church, for those who are thinking about security, especially at smaller churches. And I just challenge everybody from not only Sioux City, but also Sioux Falls, also Des Moines, also, let's see, anybody who is within about 100 miles or 150 miles of Sioux City to come down and to see what we're talking about and learn and grow. In fact, we want you to come to that so bad that I'm willing to let you come for any price at all, including nothing. If you'll just cover your lunch costs, then we're in business. So come to that, and I'm going to link the event, the Facebook event for Friday, right in the description here. So come and get some training, for gracious sakes. We're going to talk about five things. The first thing that we're going to talk about when we're talking about church environments is we're talking about planning for likely threats. And while church shootings make the top of the list in our psyche, they're not really the problem that we're most likely to deal with. We're far more likely to deal with domestic issues. When you're having problems within a relationship, particularly child custody issues, dropping kids off in your security or whatever. Next most likely thing you have to worry about from a church security perspective is medical emergencies. So things like, a person are having a heart attack, a stroke, they fall and they hurt themselves, whether that's a child, an elderly person, somebody else, whatever. So those are far more likely incidents that you have to deal with. But however, we will talk about the prevalence of active shooters, active killers on church campuses, and what we can do to prevent them. Secondly, we're going to talk about how that affects our church culture. I want to talk about, churches generally, they want an open, welcoming culture. They want everybody to feel welcome and to feel like it's an open and inviting place. And you have to balance that with the need to provide adequate security for everyone and to deal with minimizing potential risks. So reducing the risk while maintaining an open culture is something that we definitely will talk about. Next, I want to talk about verbal judo training and the fact that many incidents escalate to where they get, and they don't have to. So we're going to talk about the LEAPS method for communication. You can Google that as well. It talks about listening, empathizing, asking questions, paraphrasing, and then summarizing and seeking adequate solutions. So we're going to talk about that LEAPS method of communication, also about how verbal judo can help you with combative and confrontational people to prevent fights from happening. Finally, not finally, but we're going to talk about formal versus informal church security teams. You got to talk to your insurance providers about what's best for you in your situation. But in a lot of churches, say most American churches are under 100 people, having a formal security team is just not an option. So how do I have an informal security team? And even if I am in a larger congregation, sometimes my insurance company doesn't want that and they really get persnickety about it. So how do I have an informal security team that's nevertheless trained and ready for what might come? And then finally, we're going to talk about a layered defense, and we're going to talk about how to maintain that layered defense all the way through. So what does that mean for you personally, though? So that's what we're going to talk about in our class, and that we recommend for all pastors, church leaders, deacons, elders, those kind of things, that they come and get that information and then take that back to their congregation to help them form an effective plan that lets them worship the Lord and not worry about being unprepared for the eventualities to come your way. What does that mean for you? Well, I wouldn't choose a church personally based on security needs. If my pastor said, "Hey, we don't have a formal security team," that wouldn't bother me too much. If the church was very adamant that I couldn't protect myself and my family, that might be a significant issue. But you have to recognize that all those things are yours for the taking as well. So planning for the likely threats that you might face, you have to be able to do, which is why I carry my first aid kit on me all the time. And I carry my fire extinguisher. I do carry an armed robber extinguisher. Not fire extinguisher, I meant my firearm there, right? So I carry my burglar extinguisher with me as well. As a culture, me personally, I have to think about how much openness that I have to others versus how much security do I want with others. And I think that having that balance is very important. Next, verbal judo training. Absolutely. Reading the book, Verbal Judo, really important. Understanding that LEAPS method of communication, understanding how to talk people down from confrontational behaviors before it escalates into a fight. Also having tools so that it doesn't escalate to a deadly force encounter. Things like a taser or a pepper spray, really, really helpful. Number 4 doesn't apply to regular folk, formal versus informal. It's informal. It's you and only you. But getting formal training and informal practice so that you are ready, incredibly important. And then, of course, having a layered defense is obviously very important for you. What does that boil down to if something like what happened in Tennessee on Sunday were to happen in your church? Well, I think one of the things that was most important that I saw was that the hero of the day, his name is Robert Engel. I won't mention the killer. One of the methods of me coping is I don't mention those who are evil like that. But the hero of the day was an usher at the church named Robert Engel, and Robert was willing to confront this man who had 2 firearms on him, 2 more in his truck too, apparently. But confront him empty-handed. He had no firearm on him. He didn't have any tools on him, but he was willing to get in the fray. And having that attitude and an understanding, I don't like Wayne LaPierre saying that the only thing that stops an evil person with a gun is a good person with a gun. I don't think so. The only thing that stops an evil person is a good person, and it's me who stops the threat, whatever tools I can have on me or may not have on me. Now, I think he's a hero and should be commended for his courage, jumping in there, fighting the guy with his gun. Apparently, the guy actually shot himself with his own gun. But secondly, Robert Engel had his firearm. He was a CCW holder, had his firearm in the car, and then had to go run out to the car, get the firearm to hold him at gunpoint until police were there. And I do think that was a huge problem. He should have had his firearm on him. Now, I don't know what the church policy is. Pastor may not have allowed him to have that, and so he was being submissive and understanding his church culture. I don't want to get in the middle of that. But understand, his pastor was shot. I have an interview that was recorded with his pastor, and his pastor was shot right in the chest. His pastor's wife was shot in the leg. 4 other people shot inside the church, and a woman murdered in the parking lot. That's no time to worry about the niceties of church culture. So keep your firearm on you and know how to make shots in chaotic environments at distances that you might see in a church environment. So when we talk about those fights that are 3 to 7 yards, those are for defensive encounters with personal violence. But an active killer in your church is not a personal environment. You very well may have to take a shot at 20, 25 yards, or even beyond that. And if you do have to take a shot at those kind of distances, you need to know what it takes and where your personal marksmanship skills can take you, so you know how close you have to get before you take that kind of shot. And you have to know backstop incredibly well. You have to know, a chaotic situation to be able to focus and get that shot off and end that threat as quickly as possible. Again, Mr. Engel, incredible hero. I think he should get the keys to the city. And I have nothing but respect for him being willing to step in when he wasn't armed for whatever reason he wasn't armed. But it is a reminder to us that, number one, you should be armed. You should have your firearm on you if at all possible, if it's legal in your area. And if you don't have strict church policies against it. My church doesn't. I'm the pastor. But secondly, having your first aid skills strong and having the tools and equipment on you to use them. Now, I'm not talking about keeping an IFAC that can solve the problems of 6 wounded people. I think that's a little bit much. But being able to triage the problems, recognize, hey, man, that pastor has been shot in the chest. I need to get a compression on him real fast, get a chest seal on him, and then get somebody else to deal with him while I go look for real significant hemorrhage. Do I need to use my tourniquet on anybody here? Do I need to pack any juncture wounds? Again, we seal the box, we pack junctures, and we tourniquet limbs that are bleeding heavily. So having those skills, first aid skills, even if you're not a self-defending firearms carrier, having your firearm on you, incredibly important. And being able to mentally shift gears from I'm in an open, caring, honest place where I'm worshiping the Lord to I am in a protective mindset that is worshiping the Lord by stopping a threat around me, I think is important. So man, learn the lessons. I'm going to put some links in the description to all, some additional reading and stuff like that that hopefully will help you. And if you are anywhere near where we are in Sioux City, Iowa this weekend, I want you to come on Friday to talk with us and learn about church security. I want you to come on Friday night to learn about personal protection, and then on Saturday to learn the skills and to practice them that you will need that minute that the gunfight happens. Man, I lament that we have these things happening, but having the mindset to be prepared and ready to protect ourselves is the way, I think, to keep ourselves covered in our ASP as we worship the Lord.